Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrikin, coming to you on a very special Thursday, November 21st. We're recording the day before, but we got a lot to talk about. The USL Championship Final is upon us. RIFC traveling to the Rocky Mountains to take on Colorado Springs Switchbacks at 12 p.m. Eastern. Can the burning hot Rhode Warriors reach out and grasp victory? Well, we're going to get you ready for the most important game in this club's history. And to do that is the one and only Jason Carey. Jason, how is it going, my friend?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here, championship. First year.
Are you excited only because of this game, or are you also excited because not to be outdone? But we brought out the big guns tonight. It's someone who should need no introduction, but they're going to get one anyways. He's the lead USL analyst for ESPN. He's the co-host for USL All Access on SiriusXM. The man, the myth, the legend, Devin Kerr. Devin, how is it going?
I half expected you to say you tried to get Mike Watts and he was unavailable, so you brought me in.
To be fair, you're much more of an engager on social media. Mike's usually like a day or two behind, so
yeah,
if we need something pressing, we go. We know who the real source of truth is between the two of you.
Yeah, not to make excuses for him, but he's very much vampire in nature. That dude operates between like 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. on a level that I've never seen, including tweeting out the SiriusXM video at 1:30 a.m. last night. He puts out some of the best content that no one ever sees because it's the middle of the night. So yes, I not only do I engage during daylight hours. I don't hold office hours because I don't have an office, but I'm certainly honored to be involved in your virtual office and for this monumentous occasion that is this insane run for your squad in the final that will be.
Watts is just clearly anti-algorithm, so that's his loss. Our game, we got to get right into this. A couple quick pieces of news, and I can't think of a better person to partner with. First off, in just a few short days, we're going to be elevating one of these two clubs new to their championship glory. And the best part, it's going to be a team that hasn't gotten this far ever before. But before I want to kick off into this preview, I do want to reflect back. We read an article recently from head coach James Chambers, and he was rather vocal about the 10 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff. Devin, obviously this is something that was planned for months ahead of time, if not a year in advance. What can you tell us about the scheduling decision for one of the biggest games in USL's history? And is this going to put enough attention on this critical game, or is there more work to do in the future?
First one is, I share the frustration like you all do, regardless of time zone, to be fair, whether it was 12 Eastern or 9 Pacific, right? If we're in Charleston, if it's obviously in Colorado Springs, could have been in Vegas too. People have to understand that, unfortunately, at this point in time, USL just doesn't carry the leverage that other leagues and certainly other sports do. So whether it's NFL football, whether it's college football, basketball, certainly the NBA, although the CBS deal isn't there. This is decided before the season even starts. So basically the way that it works is the network comes and goes, here are the days that we have available for you, and here are the times that we're willing to share. So while we got 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific, and that's the day that they chose, there were other options. And without getting too deep into the weeds, this could have been at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, right? Like the weekend of Thanksgiving. And it's like, okay, it could have been on Thanksgiving Day at 9 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, again, I'm just giving a couple of examples where it would have been even more difficult. But go ahead. No, I was going to say, you asked if it's going to get enough eyeballs. I think while certainly I share the frustration, as does the league, to be fair, do you think optimally they want to play this game at noon Eastern time? Absolutely not. They want what everybody else wants, and it's fair share, it's fair game, it's viewership at 7 o'clock at night prime time. We don't live in that world. We do still live in a world where CBS is a massive network, one of the big four in this country, that is going to get a ton of eyeballs for people that not only love this league, but love the sport and love that network. Like, we still live in that type of country, and I don't think that's a bad thing, where people are just going to have it on. How many remains to be seen, but there are going to be a ton of viewership numbers compared to what people are normally getting for these matches.
I think it was Kaler on the USL show the other day made a good point where they're just going to, at bars, at, wing places, you're just going to have it on.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. And then the hope is, can some of those be converted?
Bingo.
I always go to bars at 10 in the morning when I'm in Colorado Springs. So
usually World Cup time. Yeah.
Did you guys see my itinerary already or what? I mean, come on here.
So in other quick news, it was announced today, New Mexico United head coach and most likely USL coach of the year, Eric Quill, moves on from his post at Albuquerque and takes the reins at FC Dallas in the MLS after only one full season down in New Mexico. Obviously a tremendous honor for Quill. But, lots of questions now for New Mexico, coming out of the fact that they're the leaders in the Western Conference this season. This is probably a team that fans were hoping to see some sort of dynasty or longer term build and play. That may all need to get reset now. Devin, if you're a New Mexico United fan, how are you supposed to feel about this? And is something like this going to happen to Coach Cano Smith if he wins it all?
Well, the first part is knowing the pride that New Mexico United fans take about what they're able to produce through the academy, players going to another team, players going abroad into MLS, and coaches, previously Troy Lesane, who ended up with New York Red Bull, right, and now with DC United. They take a lot of pride in that. So I'm sure they're going to be happy about it. No one's going to be happy about the fact that they just lost their record-breaking coach, right? How could you be? You'd be lying to say, I'm so overjoyed that we lost the most successful coach in the history of this organization. Knowing their owner, Peter Trevisani, he's already on the prowl. I'm actually quite surprised that this news was able to be so tight-lipped for such an extended period of time. Heard about it about 10 days ago. Rumors are that the deal was actually done about 2 weeks back, and usually that starts to filter out quite quickly. Is it possible that Cano Smith, if he won a title, and I think to be fair, regardless of he wins a title or not, I think the stamp has already been put on his body of work and what he's capable of. Is it possible he leaves? Absolutely. Just even outside USL circles, because I'm also one of the analysts for MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. The amount of respect that he carries as a person, most importantly, is pretty devastating. And I say that in the best of ways. His reach is pretty profound. And then from a tactical standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, I heard from a long period of time of what he did at that Birmingham Legion squad behind the scenes under Jay Heaps and Tommy Sohn. This is a guy that everybody was always looking to. Could it happen? Absolutely. And I think it would be great for the league to showcase a coach in general, yet alone someone who steps in as the first-year head coach and immediately makes the jump to MLS or another level. Selfishly, I'd like to see him running back. I would be worried about it for sure, but I don't want him to leave. Regardless of what the outcome is on Saturday, I want to see what he could do in second year and even a third year and start to create even more buzz within the Rhode Island organization that has this success first year, certainly has the stadium and training grounds coming, but put a stamp on it on something like we saw from a Louisville team from the get-go, from what Pittsburgh has been able to do since Bob Lilly coming in with their new training facility, right? Not just one and done.
Yeah, I think with our new stadium opening next year, obviously at some point with how well he's doing, we're going to have to accept the fact that suitors will come for him. But I really hope that he can kind of, open that first season at Tidewater.
Or maybe in like 3 or 4 more years after we've created a dynasty, he can be put on to Division I pastures. We got to move on because we've got a ton to cover. Jason, let's kick things off. Let's start looking back in time. First at the Colorado Springs Switchbacks and their history in the USL playoffs.
Yeah, so the Switchbacks entered the league with solid entries in playoffs, appearing in semifinals and quarterfinals in their first 2 years of operations. The team struggled in the following years, though, failing to qualify between 2017 and 2020, up until Hartford athletic coach Brendan Burke, then of the Switchbacks, took the club to back-to-back appearances, even making it to the Western Conference Finals in 2022. The club also made a quarterfinal showing last season, but this is their first ever championship final appearance. And more importantly, they've hosted every single playoff game as the number 2 seed.
Devin, how historic is this moment for the Switchbacks, and how do you compare it to what RIFC has accomplished on the Eastern run?
I would say that it's historic in the sense of it's really like a 4-year project. I think everybody's probably going to look at James Chambers and his body of work, but this is a long time coming, given the relationships that they brought from the Philly area. James Chambers within Bethlehem Steel, now Philadelphia Union 2 as a player. Moved into the coaching aspect of the game when he came to Colorado Springs. Stephen Hogan, Alan McCann, and Brendan Burke, when they came here, they were all Reading head coaches as well. That group goes back 15 years together. It's very well rooted, but the whole plan was to come here and create an identity. They did that immediately. This year, it became more of a balanced attack. The organization, though, made a decision right around the time Brendan Burke came to actually invest. You guys talked about the early success. I think there was a buzz here initially. They've always had the fan base, but it was, okay, let's get the team off the ground. Let's pump some money into it. And then when Steve Trittschuh was the head coach, there was really nothing. I mean, I can remember going through coaching calls in 2017, 2019, where before he went to St. Louis, they would have to legitimately field hurt players just to put numbers on the bench so that they weren't getting DQ'd from a game. I mean, that's how bad it was. They didn't have money to go get players. They would travel 14 professional players and bring 6 academy guys on the road to fill out the roster. It was terrible. So they revolutionized it a couple of years ago. They deserved the success. I would compare it to Rhode Island in the sense that James Chambers is very new on the coaching circuit. I don't think you can compare it apples to apples, though, because everything is legitimately brand new for this Rhode Island team. You know, I read an article from one of your outlets. I do apologize, I don't remember the name, but the writer was pretty upset with people saying that we needed to stop calling Rhode Island an expansion team. And I'll tell you what, all due respect, I don't, number one, it is literally the definition of an expansion team. So I don't understand how someone gets to that. And number two, I would embrace it. I would embrace the history. If I was a Rhode Island FC fan, I'd be sitting there going, yeah, we're just the third organization in our first year to get to a conference final. Yeah, we're just our third to get to a final. We can become just the second team ever to do it. I don't understand why anybody would run from that. And the first in the Eastern Conference, by the way. Look at our shiny new penny that quickly becomes this antique half dollar that everybody wants within an 18-month time frame. I think it's incredible. It's never been done, basically, and certainly not in the modern era. I don't know why anybody would ever shy away from that fact. And that had me a bit puzzled. But also, again, I wouldn't compare it. It's way too far apart.
So first off, that article was written by a Monterey Bay FC fan, so you know where their head is when that happens. And second,
how was it published in the Northeast then?
I think they published it in Medium, and then it got picked up across like the regional places. But to your point, and I argued this same point online, you know, if you stripped away the expansion part of that, and they go on to win the final, and they become the champions, you have to then compare them to better teams that had better results, like the 2022 San Antonio FC. I don't think Rhode Island could compare. I don't think Colorado Springs could compare. But if you suddenly get leverage the fact that they're an expansion team, I'm not sure. And we've gone back and forth on Twitter a couple times. I'm not sure that Rhode Island FC doesn't get the nod as being one of the greatest teams in expansion era of all time if they go and win it all this weekend.
Yeah, expansion is everything, right? Right, Jason? I mean, Jason, you were going to step in there. Apologies for getting in your way. Go ahead.
I was also just going to mention the same thing, that it was not one of our own fans who
good to know.
That, yeah,
I mean, you normally have, I hear what comes out of the Northeast. You guys normally have better sense. So I saw that and I was like, hang on a second here. There's no chance that those guys up there who drive in commonalities and all the stat-driven info that you guys have been able to pump out, that type of article was coming out.
Yeah, we soccer-wise, we're locked down tight. The fans are very well educated, very
Agreed.
Smart. When you talk to the principality of how the stadium, was secured and constructed, that's where things get a little bit hazy and gray. But we are not going to focus on that. And I want to get us back on track because we got so much to do here. Looking back now, we've covered the Switchbacks and their USL playoff history, but now we want to talk about how these two teams last saw each other, because I don't think it really went Rhode Island FC's way. The last time they did square off, RIFC failed to take any points from Widener Field, losing 3-1 in a game that RIFC basically collapsed in with an own goal, a lazy PK, this team surprisingly went up first after a header from Air Frank Nadarce, but it ended up being in Colorado's favor, as not only was it their 4th win in a row, but more importantly for Colorado at the time, it was their first comeback win in 18 opportunities, dating back to early into 2023 against New Mexico United. I guess, Devin, the first question I'd ask, is there anything that neither one of these teams needs to remember from this game as a lesson to be learned? Or are these two teams just completely different animals at this point and all bets are off?
Well, I think it's fair to answer and say both. I would say number one, the altitude is something that you want to understand, right? Coming from Rhode Island to Colorado Springs is a big difference, specifically as an athlete. And if you're in New Mexico, if you're in Colorado Springs, you're a couple thousand feet above sea level, you don't get a chance to regularly train in that. It hurts. I can tell you from firsthand experience. Like I have been running and felt like I had needles in my lungs because I was a couple thousand feet up, and it freaking hurt. Now that was when I was in Germany, went to Switzerland for preseason in the Alps, but that's not fun. I would also say that the familiarity of group selection and fighting through the environment, there are a lot of very familiar faces that are going to be on the field on Saturday that started that game and that were involved in that game, maybe in a different facet. But those are things that you come back and remember as a player, right? Like the repetition in training and games and stuff. You come back and you go, oh, well, remember this? Remember, maybe it wasn't a 3-back system. Maybe it wasn't a 4-back, whatever it is. And I'm talking both sides. But you remember when we played in that game, how he used to pivot a little bit high on the right and he really liked to do this. Film review of recent tendencies can also mess with your brain, but those are the types of things that I take away from it. Other than that, it is a very, very different era that we're living in now compared to what we saw. That feels like an eternity ago within this league for both of these squads.
Jason, how about you? What does RIFC need to do to take away, or do they just need to forget like a goldfish and move on?
I mean, in a way, maybe they kind of just need to forget. When we look back at this match, there were a few early on in the year where we kind of started off well, like in this one, scoring, but then kind of floundered towards the end. I think one of the last ones that fans remember is that Memphis breakdown where we, took a 2-0 goal lead into the 83rd minute before we fell apart. But also this match here too saw us kind of collapse there. Earlier on, we had a bad habit of getting equalized within 10 to 15 minutes after scoring, getting a little too lackadaisical in terms of defense, not knowing how to carry and close out games. And the fact that we scored so early and blew a lead, just similar to that Tampa game away, that was pretty brutal. I don't think that, Colorado bested the same RIFC team. This team really started to come together after that Louisville. So I don't know how much they'll be able to read into that, especially when you look at some of the lineup. It's not some of the same names are there, but we've kind of moved some pieces around.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And I think I agree to a certain extent. I look back at that game as a kind of a litany of errors, if you will. And it's so far ago, so many fans have just moved on and focused on, becoming the Draw Kings or getting this far into the finals. I actually went back and watched that game to go what could we, inflect on? And it really was just like a cacophony of errors on Rhode Island FC side. Even the Damus goal, or Damas, excuse me, I thought he had kind of burned the back line and earned that on the run of play. But looking back, it was Alves and Nodarce colliding together and Damas just squeezing through with no one left to contend against Coque Vegas, his former teammate. The next goal was an own goal where Carifa is tracking back. He normally plays center back. He's on the wing. The ball goes all the way across. He doesn't even see it and just heels it into the net for an own goal. And then, of course, there's Steven Turnbull's I'm gassed. This altitude sucks. And I'm just going to push down this attacking Switchbacks player and give up a penalty kick that gets converted. I don't think that really looking at it, Switchbacks did anything of, they played their game. They definitely harassed Rhode Island FC, but I don't think they beat Rhode Island FC. I think Rhode Island FC beat themselves. And so if this team can learn to not make any mistakes like that, taking this back to Widener Field this weekend, it should be an interesting thing. And I know we're going to unpack that here in a second. Before we move on, Actually, no, we're just going to move on for time's sake. These two teams have absolutely earned their right to punch their ticket to the biggest game of the year in the USL, with the Switchbacks having won 5 games in a row and Rhode Island FC now undefeated in 9 games. This is officially their longest streak. Devin, I don't know how you measure, do we count regular season and postseason games together? It's easy to combine stats, but you can say for now they're undefeated in 9. In their 4 matches to make it to the Cup final, the Switchbacks have scored 5 goals and only conceded 1 while having to play in extra time against Orange County Soccer Club. Meanwhile, RIFC have scored 8 goals, but they've conceded 3, concluding all of their affairs in 90 minutes plus stoppage time. It seems like this is a tale of an impenetrable defense versus an unstoppable offense. Devin, how would you summarize the Switchbacks' run during this playoff stretch? And what's the case here of, the East versus the West? Who's the better team? Who's the harder team that's had to get this far?
So I would say, number one, I'm very much of the belief of combining regular season to postseason. There's nothing that drives me more insane than when a team draws and wins in penalties and they call it a draw and advances on pens. They won that freaking game. Let's be really clear. I understand for statistical purposes they have to do it, but I've been involved in those. You can't convince me it's not a win. I would say that as far as the East-West conversation, the East is better. It's the eye test tells you that. Any single fan's opinion tells you that. But statistically, the East is better by a pretty large margin. They carried a plus 25 win margin, if I'm not mistaken, over the course of the season. Kano and I were texting back and forth about what the East versus West look like. And I mentioned the stats. The East dominated the West. At least statistically, that's how I view it. 63 wins, 46 losses, 35 draws. But they had a plus 57 goal differential. I just think that's an astronomical number. As far as the path to get here, and this is the bigger one to me, I view it 2 very different lights. If you would have told me that Rhode Island found a way to get to the USL Championship Final, given the way that they performed in the second half of the season, it wouldn't shock me. Now, I think there are certainly other teams in that conversation. But if you would have told me that they beat Indy, Louisville, and Charleston, I would have told you that you're freaking crazy. Because no one's going to run that gauntlet, okay? It's that simple. And that I'm not being disrespectful to Rhode Island or any other team involved in it. It is just murder's row, right? It is a near impossible feat. And to do it, at least in my opinion, in what looks to be dominating fashion. People may look at the results and say, oh, well, they only beat the Charleston Battery 2-1. Go watch the game. They primarily eliminated all attacking threats throughout the match, specifically overlapping on the outside, isolating Aaron Malloy in the midfield, and removing any sort of combination play throughout the majority of the match. Louisville, I don't think we need to say anything except that Rhode Island outplayed Louisville from start to finish. I actually thought that the closest game throughout all 3 of them was the Indy game, oddly enough. That was me. Colorado Springs, when you talk about their path, Colorado Springs, I mentioned that identity that Brendan Burke and all these guys brought a couple of years ago. Again, 3 or 4 year project here. The very famous quote that we've talked about is, defensively, that team has always struggled. And we said to Brendan Burke, your issues that you're dealing with right now, the woes, as he called them, you're on pace to give up 99 goals. And he said, yeah, but you know what? We're going to score 100. They've taken the offensive identity and tweaked it to now this team at a moment's notice can beat you in transition long up over the top. They can beat you in combination play. But to your guys' point, just 1 goal given up, 4 shutouts on the last 5, and all of a sudden they're a top 10 defensive team. They've got the balance. And so to me, being able to create that balance really mid-season and into the postseason play, it's hard to put a number on a run like that, regardless of opponent. You've shut them out and you've done it impressively, so much so that if they get a result against Rhode Island, again, there's a long way to go. But if they keep a 0 against Rhode Island, they will tie the USL Championship record for goals against average in postseason play with 2 other teams, Rochester Rhinos in 2015, Louisville City in 2017. We can talk expansion, we can talk attacking, we can talk defensive. There are numbers all over the map. But to me, contrasting routes to get to the final, and it's hard to equate one to the other. Body of work, you probably say East. Quality defensively certainly rests with Colorado Springs.
Jason, you kind of looked back at the table, comparing notes on the point accumulation and seating position, obviously very much impacting and upsetting some of the balance here. What were your kind of takeaways when you looked at this, comparing the two teams?
Yeah, like Devin had mentioned here, the reality is the East is better. So it was very much a fight, right? We were going down to the end, kind of knowing that we were going to make the playoffs, but was it going to be 4th place or 8th? There was that. It kind of went down to the wire here. So at the end of the day, there's only 1 point if we use the combined table that actually separate these two teams. Seeding has really helped Colorado, giving them that, home playoff advantage. Especially they are one of the, I think, if not the best, like the second best team in the league at home. So they've done really well that they use that altitude to their advantage, or that they're very stout defensively. And while they don't tend to score a lot of goals, they are a tough team to break down. Herrera is 6'7", their goalkeeper. He is making some phenomenal saves. So he could be someone to look out for. It's, if RIFC, let the longer the game goes on, the more advantage Colorado has.
I think that's spot on. I was looking at this lineup, and I had heard the mention of a fortress. First off, Lynn family was the fortress of the season, but I heard that moniker being thrown around for Widener Field. They're not impenetrable. There were still 4 losses and 4 draws at home for the Switchbacks this season, so some teams figured it out. But I agree with you that altitude is going to be the deciding factor, and the longer this game stretches on, the more and more it falls to Colorado Springs' favor. I think it's time to get into this game itself. Match is set to kick off at 10 a.m. Right now, as of the Weather Channel, it's currently hovering around a 54-degree kickoff, mostly cloudy, perfect New England weather. This isn't going to affect anyone here. Maybe
Speak
our
for yourself.
Our favorite,
I'm standing on the roof calling the game.
I was going to say maybe our favorite call by play-by-play caller who's from Florida here now. But Devin, I have not yet seen Pro release the assigned referees for this match. Are you aware of who will be calling the biggest game of the year for the USL Championship?
Yeah, same. Ironically enough, we're not aware either. And they're usually pretty good about that. For some reason, that hasn't made its way to us. It makes me wonder, a couple of years ago, I think it was the 2019 final. It was either 18 or 19. Pro and Pro 2. Pro 2 are most of the refs that come through USL Championship, and they are a lot of part-timers, not a lot of full-time refs. In 2018 or 19, they actually ended up utilizing a pro ref who had USL Championship experience, but was like right on the cusp and had kind of jumped into MLS a little bit. His name is Joseph Dickerson, great MLS ref now. And they actually brought him to the final. I had heard that was a last-minute change the week of. I'm not in the know on that right now, but it makes me wonder a little bit if they're thinking about bringing a different crew in for this match. But unfortunately, I don't have that information just yet.
We shall see. We love understanding who's going to call the game because there's been some controversy back and forth this year. So we'll have to find out, as the rest of the fans do, when that gets announced. Right now, as of the injury report for Rhode Island FC, we know Isaac Enking's still out for the season. Stephen Turnbull, have not seen him in photos at practice. I imagine that dislocation is season ending for him. So I don't anticipate him to be someone who would have traveled down to Colorado Springs. Jason, I got the formation up on the screen. Walk us through, who do we believe is going to be the starting 11 here for Rhode Island?
Yeah, as always, we got Koke Vegas and net, with a back 3 here of Grant Stoneman, Karifa Yao, and Morris Duggan. With that midfield 5, we have Frank Nodarce, Clay Holstad, Zachary Hervo, Mark Ibarra, and the return of Jose Quizera, which we'll talk about more here in a sec. And then we've got JJ Williams and Noah Fuson up top, with a potential bench here of Mark Doyle, Jack Panio2, Albert Deekwood, Joe Brito, Jackson Lee, and Kofi Chumesi.
I think this is right because Jojea only played light minutes for Rwanda on his international duty in AFCON on Monday. He did earn the assist and help them beat Nigeria, something that did not happen for any other team in AFCON qualifiers in their group stage. I think the question here is does Kano start by applying maximum offensive firepower, or do we see Kano hold him in reserve like he did in the last call-up for the Battery? Jason, we'll start with you. What do we think, Kano? Why do we think that that's going to be the case?
I think if we look at this, like we had mentioned a lot of times, right, the idea here is you want to go out on the attack right off the bat. The longer this game goes on, the longer it moves into the favor of Colorado Switchbacks. So even if you say Jose Quizera maybe only has a half in him, you go out offensively, try and get a goal or two, and then you can, swap Morris Dugan over to that, left wing back, or we've even seen No Fuson play out wide there. You can kind of play around with the very flexible here with these wing backs and rotations. So I think you try and go for this game early.
Yeah, I mean, Chico being the X factor is just such a fun thing to get to say out loud, and we've seen him do that in this playoff run against Lou City. Devin, does that sound right to you, or do you think we're going to see, after Chico's incredible man marking and locking down of Aaron Malloy, is this a team that needs to focus on defense in their full press, or should they be going for everything right out the gate with Quizera?
I'm with you. Mind you, field position is something that we can talk about in terms of the tactical sense, but I think you need to be aggressive. I definitely think you need to chase the game. One thing of interest, you mentioned the lockdown and what Chico was able to do within the match. Incredible, by the way, and not just on Aaron Malloy, Jay Chapman, or anybody that rotated through Emilio Icaza. I would also recognize the fact that you talk about Jojea coming back. Tyreek McGee with Jamaican men's national team split 90 minutes between two performances. Now, he only played 45 and came off at half against the United States. I'm pretty sure he'll be the starter, but that's also an area to rotate down into that puts a lot of pressure on the midfield. I don't think you have the ability to sit and let them bring the game to you. I like the idea of chasing it as well. Again, in a different area of the field for me personally, but you have to be aggressive.
We've got, for the Colorado Switchbacks, we've got them in their 4-2-3-1, a departure from the 4-3-3 they were forced to play last week after, as Devin just said, some international call-ups disrupted their available players for selection. You've got Christian Herrera in the post of the goalkeeper, and then you've got what we think is Aiden Roca, Matt Mahoney, Duke LaCroix, and Matt Real in that back four. And then you've got Speedy Williams, Zach Zandy, Javier Henriquez, Tariq McGee, and then Yosuke Hanya in that midfield three, kind of creating the attack. And then, of course, you've got lethal Ronaldo Damus in that front line. Devin, you kind of just were hinting at it. Is there a likelihood that, head coach James Chambers is going to have to do some tinkering here after seeing the successful impact of Juan Tejada last week in their last game against the Lights?
Well, the question for me is the health of Hanya. Actually came out in their conference semifinal match at halftime. They were pretty heavily criticized for that move. They brought in Quincy Armand onto the lineup, into the rotation at halftime. They thought he might have picked up a little bit of injury. Obviously lost his spot. How healthy is he? Certainly nowhere near the conversation of Stephen Turnbull, but that's something that I'm interested to have a conversation with them about. And then also, I wonder how aggressive they're willing to be on the back line. Yes, you are correct in terms of international rotation. Duke Lacroix coming out, Delence Pierre coming in. Pierre solidifies it a little bit more. He's better at man marking, but he's not as aggressive. And to me, in order to break down a Rhode Island team, that first line of confrontation, regardless of who's up there and what the combination looks like, because we know it can tweak. If you want to be aggressive and you go do Lacroix, you gain some, you lose some. He and Matt Mahoney can pump off that line, beat that first line, draw the midfield out, play to the outside, play through the diagonals. If you sit back a little bit, though, you're a little bit more sturdy defensively. To me, that's probably the biggest question mark, is who they choose for the pairing next to Matt Mahoney, regardless of what they've done all year, because it has gone back and forth, and not necessarily because of international rotation.
like we mentioned, both of these teams completely different animals, both on paper and on the pitch. And I want to drill in here specifically on the Rhode Island FC side of what this difference is between these two teams from May to now. And when you look here on the screen, we mentioned earlier, there's going to be 4 different players, potentially 5, in this roster construction for this final game. But on top of that, they really played more of an actual 4-2-3-1 themselves last time around, with just Chico up at the front. This time around, you're going to see a departure of Gabriel Alves in for the MLS veteran in Morris Dugan. You're going to see Jack Panayiotou on the bench. That was only Jack's second game ever in the history of his time with Rhode Island against Colorado. And you're going to now see the ever important contributor in Zach Harivo. And then with Turnbull out, you're going to see a return of Grant Stoneman, who missed that time to injury himself. And then there's JJ Williams, who's the complete X factor here. JJ did get some minutes in that first face-off between the two clubs, but that was also his second game back from injury, only playing about 14 minutes and not really making a lot of a contribution. Now, the striker's got 5 goals in the playoffs. He's got 2 back-to-back hat tricks in the last 4 games. This is the completely different JJ Williams. Devin, how have you watched this team transform between these two time periods?
Well, I would say number one is the keyword is team. I had a conversation with JJ Williams last week prior to the Eastern Conference Final against the Charleston Battery, and we talked about his journey. And one thing I said to him, and I said, JJ, I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone here, but the journey for this team earlier this year, it felt like a bunch of very talented individual players trying to do things on their own for the betterment of the group. Now I feel like this is an extremely tight-knit group that allows those players to go and make special plays. That's a very different conversation than, one from the other. And people might think, oh, it sounds similar. No, you have the betterment in one area, allowing people to go do something, as opposed to an individual off on their own. He said, you're spot on. We're super close. I think just the ability for coverage in so many different areas, the ability to build, and that in the best of ways, there is no one big, bright, shining light. Like Albert Dikwa, the 23 MVP, that wasn't him this year, right? Noah's probably got the biggest nod for that with all due respect,
the
Golden Playmaker. Dear Lord, I hate the name of that freaking award, but yeah, we're gonna workshop that. But he's probably got the biggest target on his back as compared to like what the spotlight is for him. Everybody else, it's like, you talked to me about this midfield early in the year, specifically those 3. There were large portions of matches where I saw those guys getting played through. Now, lockdown. And the way that they go and hunt. I talked about this in an interview I did, that the solidification of the midfield 3, to me, is probably one of the strongest points. Get the second goal in the second half, but also go back to the goal that Dikwa scores that is called back. That was all about the midfield, the way that they popped out and went hunted together on the far side of the field. You didn't get that early on. So whether you're talking about the back 3, I'm removing Koke Vegas because I know what he's capable of and always has, but back 3, your midfield grouping, your wingbacks, your striking combinations up top, moving in perfect synchronicity. It's all about the group. It's all about the team. To me, it's not one individual or tactic. It's that right there, which I think is the perfect depiction of what this squad has become over the course of the year. And to me, it's the main reason, if only, why they're here. And that's not a bad thing.
Jason, I'm going to flip this to you for players to watch, because Devin's probably got more ammunition on Colorado Springs Switchbacks players. So we're going to let you go first. Who's the player that RIFC fans need to keep their eyes on in this game?
When we talk about Colorado Springs Switchbacks here, a lot of eyes will most likely be on Demus and Zandy, but also Aiden Roca, defensive midfielder, has been drafted in the back line. Georgetown alum, has been a key piece of what we've seen this team improve despite a very rocky start to the season. He's one of those hardworking players who often goes unnoticed for his defensive responsibilities, and he'll be tasked with keeping Quizera, Williams, and Fuson at bay. If we press well, we should be able to disrupt him, though, and potentially stifle Colorado.
Devin, who do you got as the player to watch in the Switchbacks?
I would say great shout, by the way, Jason. Aiden Rocha coming out of Georgetown. That was a wrestler who turned Big East Midfield of the Year late in his career at Georgetown, a versatile guy who, to be fair, at the collegiate ranks, a national champion, had already gone from the 6 to outside back pivot. That flexibility for me is a big one for Colorado Springs. You'd be crazy not to look at Speedy Williams. You eliminate him on the ball, you've removed the heartbeat of this team. They struggle when he is not consistently on the ball. Now, moments are one thing, but large portions of the game with Speedy Williams out of it, that's a big problem for them. And I also look about their ability to morph out on the wings. One of the biggest things that I dislike about them on the width is their predictability when you get away from Jairo Enriquez. Jairo Enriquez is really good at inverting. He's really comfortable in the channel. He's really comfortable on his own or in groups. If his side is locked down, it can't be linear on the other side, right? So if it's Hanya, if it's Quenzi, if they rotate Guantahada out there, those guys are very A to B, B to C. They're not as inventive. And I think that gets them into trouble if they don't find success on both wings.
All right, we got to wrap this up here. So we got to find out, what do these teams need to do to get the win and become the champions of the 2024 USL season? Jason, we're gonna sandwich this RIFC Switchbacks and then RIFC here. What does RIFC need to do to win this game?
I think, like we've mentioned, and they've gotten better at this, but RIFC need to take this game to Colorado right off the whistle. We've seen that they've gotten better as the season has gone along at scoring earlier on in the season, where it's more of an issue. They could only score in that last 15 minutes. Like I mentioned earlier on in the pod too, the longer this game goes on, the more it's going to favor Colorado, especially with that acclimation to the weather. It's not going to work out for RIFC. It takes 9 days?
9
we've
days
heard
to acclimate. Yeah.
So at this point, they need to go out there and just get it done as fast as they can and just hold on.
Devin, what do the Switchbacks need to do? And then if you want to ask for Rhode Island, you can as well.
By the way, if it takes 9 days to acclimatize to an environment, our trips are too short because we need longer to experience the local fanfare. I would say that for Colorado Springs, figuring out how aggressive you want to be on the back line. Again, going back to Matt Mahoney and whoever the partner is, some of the best that they've seen them this year is the ability to get the ball off of their feet initially, allow the outside backs to get high, that first line of pressure coming through. If you make them go direct, they get into trouble. They got to have the ball at their feet. For Rhode Island, I think one of the biggest question marks for me, I alluded to it earlier, is field position. I fear them. I want them to be aggressive. I fear them playing a real high line of pressure. Pressing here and there is one thing. If you play high, that back line overall does not, it's plain and simple, they do not have the speed at a high line to compete with Damas. I think they have the quality in one-on-one situations. Certainly if they play in a mid to low block, you can be aggressive without pushing your back line 40 yards from your opponent's goal. If they play up over the top and turn this into a track meet, it's going to get them in trouble.
And then on my side of this, I've said it for the last 5 games now on repeat, but, scoring first is the key attribute for Rhode Island to be successful, not only in these playoffs, but also in the games leading up to it. This team.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. It's a note that I wrote on the plane. 7 of 8. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but 5 straight games, scored first in 7 of 8. Haven't lost in any of those games. Sorry, Matt. Yep. You guys deserve to know that stat. It's awesome.
Great minds think alike. Sadly, this team has gone on, I think it's now 15 games where they've won outright when scoring first. The last time, of course, against the Switchbacks back in May. So this is going to be kind of the ultimate test for this team on, 1, can they continue that in their winning way? But then 2, can they hold on and get it done? I don't think this team needs anything else at this point. They have the faith in each other. They have the faith in the fans. They've built this confidence over tough and tougher opponents as they've marshaled through this.
They fight for each other.
They really do. They really do. So in all honesty, I think if we're looking for the X factor here, it's going to be the strategic deployment of the reserves. How does Coach Cano make his substitutes? Not because of just controlling the game, but we have seen him kind of be slow to react when teams have made the more urgent change at the half, and it usually lets the opponent get away with the game in the beginning buildup of that second half. We saw it at Lynn Family Stadium. We saw it again with the Charleston Battery. So
both times we've recently played them.
Can he find a way to tactfully change those substitutions, and then also recognize if the altitude is burning his team out, rather than stretch it to go into the extra time? Can he plan in a way that will lock this team down as victors in 90 minutes plus stoppage time? I think that's going to be the big game changer. And they just need to know that they've got the fans behind them. They've got thousands of people now cheering them on here in the state of Rhode Island. And it's going to be so exciting to see. I want to wrap things up here with the projections. First off, FOTMob has an incredible 67% favorability that Rhode Island is going to win outright. That's incredible. I mean, there's just more and more RIFC fans every day. But when you look at what John Morrissey from USL Tactics built for his predictive model, we now have a 52% favorability for Rhode Island FC to win outright. The first time we've seen an away team in his entire model this season predict that kind of an outcome. And the stats speak for themselves. XG and shots are going to be in Rhode Island's favor, whereas goals against and GSA are heavily favored in the defense. It is a true story of defense versus offense. Devin, if this goes on, what do we expect to see from this game? I don't want to predict a scoreline, but what do you kind of overall predict this is going to look like when we all get to watch this live this weekend?
I know you guys are going to hate this, and please don't hate me. Contractually, I'm not allowed to guess.
Oh, no, I'm not talking scores. I'm talking just, what do you expect to see? Do you expect to see a tight game? Do you expect to see an explosive game? Do you what
I
kind
expect to see goals. Yeah, I expect to see goals. I would be surprised if there's not. I feel like it's a 3-goal game. It feels like I don't think it's a 3-0 game. It's a 1-1 that goes into extra time. It's a 2-1 regulation for me. Keeping either one of them out of the back of the net seems near impossible at this point in time. As much as I talked about Colorado Springs and how good they've been, Rhode Island just finds ways. Rhode Island also concedes, right? So it's like you've kind of got the what is it? The laws of attraction, unattainables and all that kind of stuff. I just feel like there's goals in it. I couldn't tell you honestly which side. I've been pretty good over the past couple of years since 19 of predicting who I thought would win. The problem is we film the video before the game and nobody sees it till after the game. I can tell you right now as I'm talking, and this is, what's today, Wednesday at 7:30 at night Eastern time. I don't know who I'm picking right now. I don't. It's tight. It's really tight.
Well, it is time to shine. Remember, this game kicks off at 12 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, November 23rd on Big CBS plus Tudying, SiriusXM, and 790 AM The Score. The Guild locally was at capacity last week, so if you are going to be going there, make sure that you show up at 10:45 or even earlier, as they will be turning people away when they reach capacity. The club's official watch party is at Moonshine Alley, but that's a pretty tight spot, and you do have available options in the German American Culture Society in Pawtucket, as well as Providence Brewing, who's also hosting a watch party. I can't wait to see this. We're going to be a part of the traveling away group, so it's just going to be really excited. Devin, I know we're at time, so I want to give you the final, red carpet rollout here. Where can fans find you and follow along with all the great work you do covering the USL and USL All Access?
You can find me on Instagram at DVNKRR. On Twitter, I'm at DevinKer9. If you're going to yell at me, just do it with exclamation points, please. I need enthusiasm within this. Most importantly, on the weekend, if anybody's in town, if anybody wants to say hi, don't be a stranger. The thing that I truly enjoy the most about this is the incorporation into other teams' cultures and getting a chance to experience them, whether home or away. And last but not least, I don't take for granted any opportunity that's ever put in front of me. Thank you both so very much. Thank you, Rhode Island FC fans, for letting me experience the journey this year, what has been the last 45 minutes together. It's a passion of mine, and I don't take it for granted lightly. Appreciate you guys having me.
We can't wait to have you back on and talk more USL soccer in the time to come. But until then, Jason, get us out of here.
Thanks, Devin. Yeah, make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage, which includes RIFC, and that's at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RIFC Podcast, Instagram at Raising Anchor, and then we got a website, raisinganchorpodcast.com.
One more game, never say die. Let's go.
Uno más.